Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Hans von Spakovsky, Manager of Election Law Reform Initiative and Senior Legal Fellow at the Heritage Foundation.
Well, hello, and welcome to CPAC 2014. Before I get started, I did want to tell folks that if they're going to have questions for members of our panel, they can tweet it to CPAC News, and the hashtag is Hans, H-A-N-S, panel. You know, usually they use the last name, but they figured mine would be a little too tough. April 15th is rapidly approaching, the day that all Americans don't like and fear, and so we're here to talk about the IRS targeting of conservative organizations, why that happened, how it happened, and what is going on today with it. You all realize this effort is supported by many politicians in Washington. Just recently, Chuck Schumer gave a speech in which he said that he wanted the IRS to redouble its efforts to go after conservative organizations. At the end of November, the IRS put out a new proposed regulation that in fact would govern the same kinds of organizations that were previously targeted by the IRS, and those regulations, I can tell you, are one of the worst attempts at censorship since the Alien and Sedition Acts when this country was first started. The comments period for the public ended last week. There were over 140,000 comments to the IRS, more than they've ever received, overwhelmingly against it. Now, here to talk about it today, we've got three real experts on this, starting with Cleta Mitchell, who is a partner at Foley and Lardner and a member of the firm's political law practice. She is an expert on campaign finance law, election and lobbying law, and she represents many of the organizations who were targeted by the IRS. She's testified numerous times in front of Congress, and I can tell you, if you want to see some exciting and fun video, you should pull that up. And I can tell you, I've known her for many years, and if I was in a fight with the government, this is the woman I would want in the foxhole with me, defending me against the incoming artillery rounds. Next, we have Eliana Johnson, who is a political reporter at National Review, where I'm also a contributor. She writes about Congress, the administration, and the media. She has covered the IRS scandal extensively from the time it broke in May of last year. She was the first to report that this was orchestrated out of Washington rather than Cincinnati, as both the agency and the Obama administration initially claimed. Finally, we have Christine O'Donnell, a political commentator, marketing consultant, speaker, and author. You all know that she was a Republican nominee in the 2010 special election to fill the Delaware U.S. Senate seat once held by Joe Biden, and she became one of the most talked about political candidates in 2010. Now, we're going to try to do this as a conversation so we can discuss some of the really important issues that occurred in this situation. And the very first question I've got for you is, how do you think this started and why? Cleta, let's start with you.
Well, it started because in 2009, the Tea Party movement began really in reaction to the deficit and the stimulus package that was passed by Democrats. There were no Republican votes for that. And as you remember, people just were outraged at this incredible debt that Congress had just approved. And fast forward, immediately following, we have the new president, the then new president, Obama, introducing this health care bill. And again, this just enraged and infuriated and concerned citizens all over the country. And they began to become active and have meetings and talk about, you know, we've got to get informed, we've got to get involved. All the things that we tell you every year at CPAC, you got to get informed, you got to get involved. People did that. People had never been politically involved before. And they began to do that in numbers in 2009. And then you have the Citizens United decision in January of 2010. Now, we really, as conservatives, we all applauded that because we believe in freedom and freedom of speech. And Hans and I have worked on campaign finance issues for many years together. But that Supreme Court decision absolutely traumatized the left and continues to do so to this day. Because all of a sudden now, here's what this meant in real life. Now citizens organizing these groups, these grassroots groups, not only could they talk about issues, now they could connect the dots and they could say, this congressman voted for Obamacare. This congressman voted for the stimulus package. We need to get rid of this guy. That's what they hate. That's what the left is so worried about. And so what began to happen in late 2009 and early 2010 is that the IRS suddenly says, and that was Lois Lerner, you've got the President of the United States, you have Max Baucus, the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, the Democratic chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, and 8 other United States senators who all start pounding on the IRS, demanding that the IRS do something. And that is where it started. That is, as I have said, as we've all said, those smoking guns are all laying right there. And this scandal began in Washington, which I'll be happy to talk about later, but it was out of this fury that these leftists who are running our country, running and ruining our country, became so worried that now citizens were going to be able to talk at election time about the people who were in charge of Obamacare and the stimulus package. And so they turned their attention and their sights on trying to stop these citizens' organizations and to silence their ability to talk about how people in Congress had been voting.
Eliana, you've been covering this since the very first. And do you think that the press in general has ignored this story? Have they given it the attention that it should be given?
I think Republicans in Congress were very lucky. Initially, when the story broke, there was tremendous interest in it and coverage because there was a trifecta of stories that hit the administration. The IRS was one of them. The administration monitoring the AP was another one of them. And the media realizing that the administration had not been totally straight with them on the Benghazi scandal was another one. So these 3 stories all hit at the same time, and there was huge coverage of the IRS and the other 2 stories, and it was a tough time for the administration. But it's very difficult to keep a story on the front pages or even on the back pages over the course of several months. And you've seen it recede from the headlines. I don't think that Republicans in Congress have done a tremendous job painting a picture of what happened here, a compelling story that's easy for people to follow. And I think that's one of the reasons, though it's obviously, again, hard to keep people's interest, and you're dealing with a complicated and admittedly boring matter, which is the intricacies of the Internal Revenue Service when it comes to how some of this has worked. So, you know, the press covered it in the beginning, and also there was a lot of obfuscation that came from Democrats, which is they made this into an issue of, oh, well, you know, if Barack Obama didn't pick up the phone and call Lois Lerner or the people working for her and tell them to hold up the applications of Tea Party groups, then there was no scandal. And so that's what you hear coming from Elijah Cummings, the ranking member of the House Oversight Committee, that, you know, Republicans have tried to use this to slander the administration and the White House, and I don't think that Republicans have been solid responding to that and saying, no, you know, regardless of whether or not the White House ordered this, if we have partisan bureaucrats who are able to do this sort of thing, that's a tremendous problem, and we need to talk about what an appropriate solution is to that. Yeah, and that in itself warrants press coverage.
Right, although I've heard people say that the White House didn't need to pick up the telephone because the president had a megaphone, and he was clearly giving speech after speech after speech, condemning these grassroots organizations, saying they were getting dark money and that they need to be investigated. Christine, you actually were one of the people whose tax records were illegally accessed. One of the issues that's come up recently is a lot of questioning of whether or not the Justice Department is actually conducting a serious investigation, because there have been leaks from inside saying, you know, no criminal violations are going to be charged, leaks which by themselves are unethical, and also allegations that one of the lawyers assigned to help lead the investigation is a large Obama donor. What has been your experience with the government in trying to investigate what happened to you?
Well, I think that why there's a Stonewall now is also part of the reason of why this IRS scandal, you know, began in the first place. This administration has an arrogance of thinking that they're untouchable, and they can use the IRS as a political weapon without any kind of consequences. And that's why it's so important that not just conservatives, but people all across America and across the aisle stand up against this. Because what happened in my case was that about a year ago, a federal investigator came to me in Delaware. We met in person, and he told me that on the day that I announced my U.S. Senate campaign, my IRS records had been inappropriately accessed by a gentleman named David Smith, who worked at the Delaware Department of Revenue. And a couple hours later, there was an erroneous tax lien filed with Newcastle County against me, a tax lien against a property that I no longer owned. The IRS said that it was a computer glitch and it was an error, but the damage had been done already. That erroneous tax lien had been widely circulated in the media and had been something that had become attached to my name and my reputation. And so I'm very grateful that TIGTA is investigating and the U.S. Senate is investigating, as is the Ways and Means Committee. However, specifically to your question, you know, the fact that the Justice Department has acknowledged criminal wrongdoing, yet declines to prosecute, should enrage everybody. Because if it happened to me, that means everyone in this room could be a target unless we stop it now. They're using the IRS to intimidate people off of the battlefield, to shame you into inactivity so that they can run their agenda, you know, however they want, unopposed. And we have to stand up against it. And if we speak up, if the public outrage is loud enough, we can back Eric Holder into a corner to the point where he is forced to do something. Yet, unfortunately, in my situation, I was told that a lot of the investigators' hands are tied because there's something called Rule 6103. Rule 6103 says that these government workers with access to our tax information cannot pry and cannot reveal it. Well, that was supposed to prevent what happened to me, but it's being, I believe, misapplied, and it's protecting the person who accessed my tax records.
Yeah,
They're saying that
one of the things that, and that has happened, not just in Christine's case, but at least 4 conservative organizations had their confidential donor schedules released publicly. I've heard of no liberal groups whose donors have been publicly released. But I know of at least 4 conservative organizations whose donor records were released. And Section 6103 of the tax code says it is a felony for the IRS to release confidential tax information. And what the IRS has done over the years, just as they've done in Christine's case, is they have said that once the IRS conducts an investigation of the wrongdoing, and they identify the individual IRS employee responsible for the wrongdoing, that they will not only do they turn it on its head and say it protects the wrongdoer, the employee of the IRS. They will not even tell you. They won't tell Christine. They won't tell the National Organization for Marriage who it was who was responsible for releasing their confidential tax information, because they say, well, that is confidential taxpayer information, so we can't tell you. I mean, it completely twists the purpose of Section 6103. And just dealing with the IRS the last several, I mean, I started dealing with this when I began to realize in 2009 that there was something going on, because normally it would take about 3 to 4 weeks to get a 501c4 application processed. I filed one for an organization in October of 2009. They cashed our check within 30 days, and we never heard another word until June of 2010. And guess who we heard from? We heard from Washington. We didn't hear from Cincinnati. So I knew, and then later that another year passed, I talked to the IRS in Cincinnati about another 2 applications of clients who'd been waiting now for more than a year. And the agent in Cincinnati told me, basically, lady, there ain't anything I can do because we are waiting for instructions from Washington. And that's what I was told in the fall of 2011, which is what that first conversation I ever had with Eliana was about that, and about the fact that that whole business of these rogue agents or boneheads in some remote office was just a complete and total lie.
Supposedly, the Justice Department is conducting a criminal investigation, but also, of course, several committees in the House of Representatives have been investigating this, including the House Committee on Government Oversight and Reform, the Ways and Means Committee. Do you all think that, one, a special committee should have been appointed to investigate this, and two, the committees that have been trying to investigate it, do you think they've done everything they should have been doing to try to find out what happened here?
I think because of Rule 6103, their hands are tied a lot. Well, I had a meeting on the Hill today, and I did find out that they introduced legislation to change Rule 6103. So of course we said, could you write it into the bill that that's retroactive and that I can be told? But I do hope that there is more that they do. I would like to see David Smith put under oath. Ask him, why did you go into her records? I'd like to see his boss put under oath, see what they say. I think that the more that we are engaged, the more we're talking about this, the more Congress can do something. But the bad news of what I learned in my meeting this morning is that they can only do so much, and eventually it has to become a criminal investigation, which is why, with Cleta's help, we're starting the Legal Offense Fund. And notice I say offense fund, because we plan to go on the offensive with this and hire our, thank you. We need your help, so go to christinepac.com and donate, please. But we plan to go on the offensive and hire our own team of private investigators who aren't bound by certain scopes of what they're supposed to do and what they aren't supposed to do. And we're gonna make sure that this does not happen again, because this throws a stake right into the heart of our freedom. And everything that we're fighting for when we're talking about getting involved, as Cleta said, citizens speaking up because they're frustrated with the direction of our country. If we don't have fair elections, then what's the point of doing all of this? So we have to stop this right now, and I thank everybody for their help and encouragement in doing that.
Do you have anything you want to add to that?
I think it's tough to tell at times how the investigations are going, but they certainly are proceeding. And I think you just saw Darrell Issa drag Lois Lerner back before the committee and her invoke the Fifth Amendment once again. And he revealed contents of emails that he had obtained that the committee had previously not revealed. And the Ways and Means Committee announced today that, yes, the IRS had agreed to turn over the rest of Lois Lerner's emails.
And think about that. Let me underscore what Eliana just said. This investigation began last May. It is now March. And today, the IRS has finally said, today, that they will release all of Lois Lerner's emails. Now, does someone want to tell me how it is possible that the media isn't just out of control, angry at this stonewalling that has been going on? I mean, it is breathtaking. She's at the epicenter of this investigation. And today, they say, oh yeah, we'll turn over her emails. I mean, I don't even know how anyone could have been conducting an investigation without having access to her emails. Excuse me.
No, that's, you know, so at times it's difficult to say how thorough the investigations have been because they simply don't have the contents, but ISA did, he proceeded to question Lerner even though she was not providing answers, and one of the emails that he read was the following. She wrote an email in February of 2011 that said, Tea Party matter very dangerous. This could be the vehicle to go to court on the issue of whether Citizens United overturning the ban on corporate spending applies to tax-exempt rules. Cincy should probably not have these cases. So this was the person who, when she announced that the IRS actually had been inappropriately targeting groups, said it was rogue agents in Cincinnati. We have the president who initially said everybody should be angry about this, saying there's no corruption here, you know, not a smidgen of corruption. And so obviously the investigation should proceed. I don't know whether a special committee is necessary. It seems to me the committees are doing a good job, but what needs to be improved is, I think, the communication. People need to be told a story. As you asked, how did this start and how did it end?
Well, it hasn't ended
for people.
It hasn't ended. Let me tell you what they did, what they've done since all of this. In the day after Thanksgiving, they announced proposed regulations that, if adopted, by the way, would mean that in even-numbered years, CPAC could have no candidates, no speakers who were candidates for office. How would you like that? None of these fine young state legislators who might be in cycle, none of the presidential candidates, because the rules would say that a cost of putting on an event where a candidate for office speaks within 30 days of a primary or 60 days of a general election would have to be counted against the primary purpose of the 501c4 organization hosting the event, which would mean that the American Conservative Union would have to count all of CPAC expenses as not toward its primary purpose. And they issued, that's just one example of the regulations that they issued the day after Thanksgiving. And we did organize, I mean, I was so angry when I saw those. So I thought, but there was no way to try to organize people till after the first of the year. So we waited till then, and then we worked very hard. A number of people worked very, very hard to generate those 146,000 plus emails. I mean, comments opposing the regulations, almost all of them. So guess what they did this week? I'm reading my exempt organizations update that comes to my computer once a month from the IRS. 4:55 p.m. on Tuesday, the IRS has stuck into a newsletter, buried in it, no announcement, no PR release, that from now on, all applicants for C4 status will have to answer, if they appear to be engaged in lobbying or any kind of advocacy, will have to answer all the questions that the Tea Party groups were subjected to for the past several years. It is a very lengthy set of questions. And this time, so what they're now trying to do, it's the same subjects as the Tea Party questionnaires, it's the same subjects as the regulations. And they did that this week. We learned that yesterday, we learned that Lois Lerner had given an interview to the Department of Justice criminal investigators within the last 6 months, but she still won't speak to the American people and to their elected representatives. And we have the President of the United States calling this phony, and the IRS doesn't announce until today they're going to turn over the emails. I think Christine is right. I think we are going to have to take matters into our own hands, set up private investigations, and rewards for whistleblowers. And I got an email just a few moments ago from a retired IRS employee who told me that he worked in the exempt organizations unit a number of years ago, but his responsibility was to get those applications processed and out the door within 30 days, which was my experience until the end of 2009.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, one of the other important reasons we have to take matters into our own hands is we have to keep in mind that the IRS is soon going to have access to our medical records thanks to Obamacare. So in my case, you know, I wasn't treated differently like the Tea Party groups were. Someone actually went into my records. And then this, you know, access of my records randomly and coincidentally turned into an erroneous tax lien on me. If this government employee can get, and he's saying it was just part of a routine check. If he can get away with this without any consequences, without even getting fired, which I actually think there should be jail time, then imagine, imagine what's going to happen when people step up to run for office and these same government employees have access to your medical records. Imagine what's going to happen if you write a letter to the editor speaking out against a politician. What's going to be exposed about your medical records or your tax records? When a government employee has access and has that kind of power, it should not be abused without serious consequences. And that's up to you guys.
Let me go back to something, Cleta, that you mentioned, and that is that the IRS is now going to implement these very intrusive questions that they were asking of Tea Party and other organizations. Many have said to me that they think that in addition to trying to chill the political speech of these organizations, that the real intent of both the targeting and these new regulations is because they want to identify the donors of these organizations and go after them. Do you think that's part of what's going on here?
I absolutely think that one of the great, and Eliana and I have talked about this at some length because we've tried to figure out how you would get our arms around it, but I have traveled the country a lot in the last year speaking about the IRS scandal, and everywhere I go, people say, you know, I had never been audited, ever, until I gave money to a conservative group, and then I was audited. And I actually believe that what the IRS has been doing, and I said this the other day because I actually did meet with the Justice Department a week ago today because I'd been haranguing about the fact that they'd never called me, so they finally called me. Yeah, actually, I filed my testimony that, on a Tuesday morning, February the 4th, castigating the Department of Justice for their sham investigation as evidenced by the fact that they'd contacted none of my clients, none of the other Tea Party groups, and hadn't contacted me. Within 3 hours, I had a phone message and an email message from the Department of Justice saying, we're trying to reach you. But I raised the point about the audits, and I think that the IRS has been using publicly filed campaign finance donor reports that are required by law that candidates have to file. And I think they've been using the Schedule B donor information for who's given to conservative organizations. And I think that has gone from exempt organizations and the 990 people, whatever division that is, to the audit division. And I think there has been a consistent, concerted effort to target and audit conservative donors. And I said that. There was a TIGTA representative in the interview that I had a week ago, and I said that. I said, I think that's something you need to investigate. So the TIGTA representative, that's the Inspector General for Treasury Administration, said, well, if you have any information on that, we'd sure like to see it. And I looked at him and I said, you're the one that has access to all the information, not me. I'm waiting for you and the 3 FBI agents and the Justice Department to investigate this. You're looking to me to do your job? I mean, that's really where, but I think that's a huge part of this scandal. Huge part of this scandal. And we see an email from Lois Lerner referring to the wealthy Kochs. And that's where it all started.
I was just going to say, I think, especially in 2010 and then again this year in 2014, all of the public attacks that you see from the Democrats on the Koch brothers are really a template for this. And Democrats do not like donor anonymity. They don't like dark money. They want these people to be named. And 501c4s do not have to publicly expose or publicly name their donors. And you've seen Chuck Schumer and several Democratic senators, from Al Franken to Max Baucus, a whole number of them call on the IRS to change 501c4 regulations, and that's what the agency has done with these proposed rules, change these regulations, and a number of these groups would have to begin naming their donors if they were forced to shift out of 501c4 status and become 527s or 501c6s, and it would result in a lot more people being treated the way the Koch brothers are, which the people who are associated with them now or associated with other groups really don't want, because they see what has happened to the Kochs in terms of the notoriety that they've gained as a result of their political donations.
Well, and let me just clarify one thing, however. They don't, the liberals don't like our undisclosed donors. They have plenty of undisclosed donors on their side, but you know.
Well, I would say, I think that, and even the donors who are known, like you've seen Tom Steyer has been in the news a lot in recent weeks, they're treated a bit differently, I think, by the media. They get more friendly treatment from the press. Tom Steyer, the big environmental donor who's a billionaire, got, you know, I think a friendly profile in the New Yorker and in the New York Times. And the Kochs come in for a different sort of treatment, which is what scares conservative donors off, but liberal donors, I don't think, have to fear that same sort of public flaying.
Yeah, but we do have some of these organizations that are always castigating the conservative groups about not disclosing their donors, and of course, they don't disclose their donors, the liberal groups.
And that is going to have to be it. We're out of time, but please give a round of applause for our great panelists.
Top of the world.